The gunshot that killed Amelia Barrett's father echoed through her memory every time her stomach growled, which was constantly these days in the summer of 1882. She crouched in the darkness behind a small ranch house on the outskirts of Paradise, Nevada, her thin cotton dress doing little to protect her knees from the rocky desert soil as she reached through the wooden slats of the garden fence and plucked a ripe tomato from the vine. The moon hung low and fat in the sky, providing just enough light for her to see the vegetables that could mean the difference between eating and starving for another day. Her younger brother Samuel waited back in the abandoned mining shack they called home, and she had promised him a real meal tonight. The tomato was warm in her palm, sun-heated even in the cool night air, and she placed it carefully in the wicker basket she had brought. Her fingers moved quickly to a cluster of green beans, then to a squash plant heavy with yellow fruit. Guilt twisted in her stomach, but desperation was a stronger motivator than morality. 3 weeks had passed since she had buried her father in the hard Nevada ground after a claim dispute turned violent, and the small amount of money he had left them was nearly gone. At 19 years old, she was responsible for keeping her 14-year-old brother alive in a territory that showed no mercy to orphans. "Those beans are particularly tender this year," a deep male voice said from directly behind her, and Amelia's heart nearly stopped. She spun around so fast that she dropped the squash, her breath catching in her throat as she pressed herself against the fence. A tall man stood just a few feet away, his silhouette broad-shouldered against the starlit sky. She had been so focused on the garden that she had not heard him approach, and now she was caught red-handed with stolen vegetables in her basket. Her mind raced through possibilities. Would he shoot her? Have her arrested? The Paradise jail was not a place where young women fared well. "I'm sorry," she stammered, setting the basket down and raising her hands slightly. "I'll put them back. We haven't eaten in 2 days, and I thought put them back." The man stepped closer, and the moonlight caught his features. He was younger than she had initially thought, perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes that seemed to assess her without judgment. He wore simple ranch clothes, a work shirt with the sleeves rolled up and worn denim pants. "You will bruise them handling them twice. Besides, you missed the carrots, and they are the best crop I have got right now." Amelia stared at him, certain she had misunderstood. What? The cowboy, because that was clearly what he was. From his weathered boots to his sun-bronzed skin, walked past her to the garden gate and opened it properly. He stepped inside and began pulling carrots from the earth with practiced efficiency, shaking the dirt from their orange roots. "How many people are you feeding?" "I, two, myself and my brother." She could not make sense of what was happening. "Are you not going to call the sheriff?" "For what? Taking vegetables." He added the carrots to her basket, then moved to a different section of the garden where lettuce grew in neat rows. "Sheriff Morgan has better things to do than arrest hungry people. Though I have got to say, your technique could use some work. You were trampling the pepper plants." Heat flooded Amelia's cheeks, embarrassment mixing with confusion and a strange, unexpected urge to laugh. "I have never stolen from a garden before. This is my first time." Figured as much. He pulled several heads of lettuce and placed them in the basket as well, then added more tomatoes and another squash to replace the one she had dropped. "You are the Barrett girl, are you not? Your father was killed a few weeks back over that silver claim dispute." The mention of her father sobered her instantly. "Yes, Amelia Barrett, Ethan Mallory." He extended his hand, an oddly formal gesture given the circumstances, and after a moment's hesitation she shook it. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip firm but not crushing. "I was sorry to hear about your father." Heard it was Pete Donovan who shot him. Yes. The single word came out harder than she intended. Pete Donovan was still walking free in paradise, claiming self-defense, and there was nothing she could do about it. Her father had been a dreamer who chased silver deposits with more enthusiasm than success, and he had made the fatal mistake of filing a claim on land that Donovan wanted. No witnesses had come forward to contradict Donovan's version of events. Ethan released her hand and picked up the now full basket, testing its weight. This should last you and your brother a few days if you are careful with it. There is a creek about a quarter-mile east of here where you can catch fish, too, if you know how to set a line. I know how. Her father had taught her that much, at least, during their years of wandering from mining camp to mining camp across Nevada and California. Mr. Mallory, I do not understand why you are doing this. Doing what? Helping me. I was stealing from you. He looked at her for a long moment, and in the moonlight, she could see something complicated cross his face. My mother died when I was 15, he said finally. Left me and my younger sister to fend for ourselves. A neighbor woman named Mrs. Chen brought us food every day for 6 months until I got the ranch running properly. Never asked for anything in return, never made us feel like charity cases. She just said that people need to look out for each other because the desert sure will not do it. He held out the basket to her. Come back tomorrow. Same time if you need to avoid people seeing you, but you can also come during the day. I do not care either way. Amelia took the basket, its weight substantial and reassuring in her hands. She could feel the promise of meals in it, the possibility of seeing her brother smile again. Why tomorrow? Because this will not last you forever, and I have got more vegetables than one man can eat. He walked her to the gate and held it open. Besides, someone should be eating them. Otherwise they just rot on the vine, and that seems like a waste. She stepped through the gate, then turned back to look at him. In the starlight, with the desert stretching out vast and silver behind him, Ethan Mallory looked like something out of a dime novel. But there was nothing fictional about the kindness in his eyes or the way he had filled her basket without making her feel small. Thank you, she said, and the words felt inadequate for what he had done, but they were all she had. Tomorrow, he repeated, and it sounded less like an instruction and more like a promise. Amelia walked back toward town with the basket balanced on her hip, her mind churning. She had come here tonight expecting to steal what she needed and disappear back into the shadows where she and Samuel had been living since their father's death. Instead, she had met a cowboy who defied every expectation she had about how people treated desperate strangers. The weight of the vegetables felt almost foreign after so many days of hunger, and she caught herself walking faster, eager to get back to Samuel and show him that their luck might finally be changing. The mining shack was dark when she arrived, tucked back in a small canyon away from the main part of paradise. It had been abandoned for years, the silver vein that had justified its construction long since played out. But it had 4 walls and a roof that mostly kept out the rain, which made it a palace compared to sleeping in the open desert. She pushed open the door quietly, not wanting to startle her brother. Amelia. Samuel's voice came from the corner where they had made a rough bed out of old blankets. Did you get anything? Look. She set the basket down and struck a match to light their single candle. In the flickering light, the vegetables looked almost unreal, a cornucopia of color and life. Samuel sat up quickly, his thin face lighting up with an expression she had not seen in weeks. How did you get all this? He reached for a tomato, then paused. You did not get caught, did you? I did get caught. Amelia settled down beside him and began sorting through the basket, planning what they would eat tonight and what they should save. But the man who owns the garden, he just filled my basket and told me to come back tomorrow." Samuel bit into the tomato, juice running down his chin, and for a moment he looked like the carefree boy he had been before their father died. Why would he do that? I am not entirely sure. Amelia selected a carrot and bit into it, the sweet crunch of it almost shocking after days of near starvation. "But I think maybe there are still good people in the world." They ate until their stomachs were full for the first time in weeks, and Amelia told Samuel about Ethan Mallory and his garden and the strange conversation they had shared under the stars. Her brother listened with the intensity of someone hearing a fairy tale, and perhaps in a way, it was. In the harsh reality of the Nevada Territory in 1882, kindness was rare enough to seem magical. "Are you going to go back tomorrow?" Samuel asked as they settled down to sleep, their stomachs finally quiet. "Yes." Amelia pulled the thin blanket up over both of them. "He said to come back, so I will." She did not mention that part of her wanted to go back for reasons that had nothing to do with vegetables. There had been something in Ethan Mallory's eyes when he looked at her, a steadiness that made her feel seen rather than invisible. In a town where most people looked through her like she was a ghost, that was a rare and precious thing. The next evening, Amelia returned to the garden just as the sun was setting, painting the Nevada sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed too vivid to be real. She had left Samuel at the shack with strict instructions to stay put and not worry, and she had tucked her hair behind her ears and brushed as much dust from her dress as possible. It was vanity, maybe, but she did not want to look quite as desperate as she felt. Ethan was already in the garden when she arrived, tending to the plants with a care that spoke of long practice. He looked up as she approached, and a slow smile crossed his face that did something strange to her heartbeat. "You came back," he said, straightening up and wiping his hands on his pants. "You told me to." Amelia held up her empty basket. "The vegetables yesterday kept us fed. I wanted to thank you properly." "No thanks needed." He gestured her into the garden. "Come on. I will show you what is ready to pick, so you can do it right." For the next hour, as the desert cooled and the stars began to appear, Ethan taught Amelia how to tell when tomatoes were perfectly ripe, how to harvest lettuce without damaging the plant, and which herbs growing along the border of the garden were best for cooking. He moved through the rows with an easy confidence, talking about soil composition and water management in a way that suggested this garden was more than just a food source. It was a passion. "Where did you learn all this?" Amelia asked, carefully cutting a head of cabbage the way he had shown her. "Most ranchers around here focus on cattle, not vegetables. My mother." Ethan pulled weeds from around the base of a tomato plant with gentle fingers. "She grew up in Missouri where everything was green, and when she came out here to the desert, she refused to let it beat her. She built this garden from nothing, made the soil work through sheer stubbornness. After she died, keeping it going felt like keeping a piece of her alive." There was a weight to his words that Amelia understood intimately. "My father used to say that the best way to honor the dead was to keep living the way they would want us to, though I am not sure he would be proud of me stealing vegetables." "You were not stealing, you were surviving." Ethan looked at her seriously. "There is a difference." "Is there?" Amelia sat back on her heels, the cabbage cradled in her lap. "It feels like the lines have gotten blurry since he died. I keep making choices I never thought I would have to make." Like, she hesitated, then decided he had been honest with her, so she owed him the same courtesy. "Like lying to Samuel about how bad our situation really is. Like considering taking a job at the saloon even though I know what that would eventually mean. Like coming to steal from your garden in the middle of the night because I was too proud to beg but too desperate not to try something." Ethan was quiet for a moment, and she worried she had revealed too much, made herself too vulnerable. But when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than judgmental. "What did your father do before he was a prospector?" Always chasing the next big silver strike, always sure that fortune was just around the corner. The familiar ache of loss settled in her chest. He was a dreamer, which is a dangerous thing to be in a place like this. "And you, what do you dream about?" No one had asked her that in so long that she almost did not know how to answer. Her dreams had become so small, so focused on immediate survival, that she had almost forgotten there could be more. "Stability," she said finally. "A place to call home, knowing where my next meal is coming from. Making sure Samuel has a chance at a real life instead of just scraping by." She paused. "That probably sounds boring. It sounds honest." Ethan stood and offered her his hand to help her up. His palm was warm against hers, and he held on for just a moment longer than necessary. "And for what it is worth, I do not think those dreams are small at all. They are just harder to achieve than most people admit." They finished filling her basket as the last light faded from the sky, and when Amelia prepared to leave, Ethan stopped her with a hand on her arm. The touch was light, respectful, but it sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cooling evening air. "I have got a proposition for you," he said, and something in his tone made her pulse quicken. "What kind of proposition?" "I need help around the ranch. The garden is just part of it. I've got cattle to tend, fences that need mending, a house that is falling apart because I spend all my time keeping the business running." He spoke quickly, as if worried she would interrupt. "It is too much for one person, and I have been putting off hiring help because most of the ranch hands in Paradise spend their wages on whiskey and gambling. But you need steady work, and I need someone I can trust. So I am offering you a job." Amelia stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "You want to hire me, to work on your ranch, you and Samuel, if he is willing. There is plenty of work for both of you, and I have got a small bunkhouse out back that has not been used in years. You could live there instead of wherever you are staying now." He met her eyes steadily. "It would be honest work for honest pay, and you would not have to worry about where your next meal was coming from." It sounded too good to be true, which in Amelia's experience meant it probably was. "Why would you do this? You do not know me. I know you are desperate enough to steal vegetables to feed your brother, but you came back the next day like I asked. That tells me you are both desperate and honorable, which is a rarer combination than you might think." His voice softened. "Look, I understand if you do not trust me. We just met. But the offer is genuine, and it stands whether you accept it tonight or need time to think about it." Amelia thought about the mining shack with its leaking roof and dirt floor. She thought about Samuel's thin face, and the way he tried to hide how hungry he was. She thought about the dwindling money, and the limited options available to a 19-year-old girl with no family and no prospects in a territory where women were scarce and often viewed as commodities rather than people. "What would you pay?" she asked, because she needed to know if this was real. "Room and board for both of you, plus $30 a month." He named a figure that was more than fair, more than generous actually for ranch work. "Samuel can help with the lighter chores, and you can handle the garden, the cooking, and whatever else needs doing. I will not ask you to do anything you are not comfortable with, and if it does not work out, you can leave anytime. No hard feelings. $30 a month, a place to live, food, security." It was everything she had been desperately wishing for, handed to her by a cowboy who had caught her stealing and responded with kindness instead of anger. Every instinct she had developed since her father's death told her to be suspicious, to look for the catch, to protect herself and Samuel from disappointment or worse. But when she looked at Ethan Mallory standing in his garden under the stars, all she saw was sincerity. "Can I bring Samuel here tomorrow to see the place before we decide?" she asked. Relief crossed Ethan's face, suggesting he had genuinely worried she would refuse. "Of course. Come by in the morning. I will show you both around properly, answer any questions you have. Then we will be here." Amelia picked up her basket, already planning what she would tell her brother. "Thank you, Mr. Mallory. This is more than I hoped for. Call me Ethan. And you are welcome, Amelia." The way he said her name, careful and warm, made something flutter in her chest that she firmly told herself was just gratitude. She walked back to the shack with her mind racing faster than her feet. The idea of having a real roof over their heads, of not having to worry constantly about money and food, seemed almost impossible to believe. But Ethan had been nothing but straightforward with her, and the opportunity was too good to pass up based on nothing more than general caution. Samuel was predictably excited when she told him about the job offer, bouncing around the small shack with an energy she had not seen from him in months. They stayed up late talking about what it would be like to live on a real ranch, to have steady work and steady meals. Her brother fell asleep with a smile on his face, and Amelia lay awake staring at the stars through the gaps in the roof, thinking about Ethan's hands as he had taught her to harvest vegetables, and the way his eyes had held hers when he made his offer. She barely knew him, she reminded herself. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. The fact that he was handsome and kind and made her feel something she had not felt in a very long time was irrelevant. She needed this job to survive, and she could not afford to complicate it with foolish, romantic notions. But as she drifted off to sleep, she found herself remembering the way his smile had looked in the starlight, and she decided that maybe a small amount of foolishness could be forgiven given the circumstances. The next morning dawned clear and hot, typical for Nevada in the summer. Amelia woke Samuel before the sun was fully up, and they made themselves as presentable as possible with the limited resources they had. She braided her dark hair back from her face and made Samuel tuck in his shirt, wanting to make a good impression even though Ethan had already offered them the job. They reached the ranch as the morning was heating up, and in the daylight, Amelia could see details she had missed during her nighttime visits. The main house was small but well built, constructed from wood that must have been hauled in at great expense. The garden stretched out behind it, even more impressive in the sunlight with its neat rows and thriving plants. Beyond the house, she could see cattle grazing in a fenced pasture, and a barn that looked like it had seen better days but was still standing strong. Ethan emerged from the barn as they approached, and Amelia felt her heart do that strange flutter again. In the daylight, she could see the sun-weathered lines around his eyes and the strength in his shoulders as he walked toward them. He wore a simple work shirt and a hat that shaded his face, and he moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. "You must be Samuel," he said, extending his hand to her brother. "I am Ethan Mallory. Your sister has told me good things about you." Samuel shook his hand with a solemnity that made him seem older than his 14 years. "She said you need ranch hands, sir." "I do. And I think you two would be perfect for the job. Want me to show you around?" For the next hour, Ethan gave them a comprehensive tour of the property. He showed them the barn where he kept his horses and stored equipment, the pastures where his cattle grazed, the chicken coop that desperately needed repairs, and finally the bunkhouse where he said they could live. It was a small structure, just 2 rooms really, but it was clean and dry with real beds and even a small stove for cooking. "It is not much," Ethan said, standing in the doorway as Samuel explored the space with wide eyes. "But it is solid, and it is yours if you want it." I will respect your privacy. This would be your home, not just a place you sleep." Amelia walked through the room slowly, running her hand along the windowsill, testing the mattress on one of the beds. It was more than she had dared to hope for. The shack they had been living in could not compare to this, and the idea of having a real door that locked, real walls that kept out the wind and dust, made her throat tight with emotion she refused to let show. "What would our duties be exactly?" she asked, needing to understand the full scope of what he was offering. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, his posture relaxed. "For you, I would say managing the garden, cooking meals, helping with the chickens once we get the coop fixed. General household work, basically, nothing too strenuous. For Samuel, I could use help mending fences, tending the cattle, basic ranch maintenance. I will teach him everything he needs to know. Neither of you would be working alone. I would be right there alongside you for most of it. And you would really pay us $30 a month plus room and board?" Samuel asked, his young voice skeptical in a way that broke Amelia's heart. Her brother had learned too early not to trust good fortune. "I really would." Ethan met Samuel's eyes with the same seriousness he had shown Amelia. "I need the help and you need the work. It is a fair trade, and I always keep my word." Amelia looked at her brother, and she could see the hope warring with caution in his expression. They had been disappointed too many times to believe in easy answers, but they also could not afford to turn down a genuine opportunity out of fear. She thought about the long, hungry nights in the mining shack, the constant worry about money, the feeling of being trapped with no way forward. This was a way forward, offered by someone who had no reason to help them except simple human decency. "We accept," she said, before she could second-guess herself. "When do you want us to start?" The smile that broke across Ethan's face was bright enough to rival the Nevada sun. "How about right now? You can move your things in today and we will start the actual work tomorrow. That will give you time to settle in and get comfortable." "We do not have much to move," Samuel admitted. "Just some blankets and personal things. We could get it all in one trip." "Then let me hitch up the wagon and I will drive you. No sense in you walking back and forth in this heat." Ethan pushed off from the doorframe and headed toward the barn, calling back over his shoulder, "Make yourselves at home. This is your place now." After he left, Amelia and Samuel stood in the bunkhouse looking at each other with matching expressions of disbelief. "This is really happening," Samuel whispered. "We are not going to starve." "We are not going to starve," Amelia repeated, and the words felt like a prayer of thanksgiving. She pulled her brother into a hug, holding him tight for a moment before releasing him. "But we are going to work harder than we ever have before. Mr. Mallory is giving us a chance and we are not going to waste it." "Ethan," Samuel corrected with a grin. "He said to call him Ethan." "He told me that too," Amelia admitted, feeling her cheeks warm at the memory. "But it feels too familiar. He does not seem like he stands on ceremony." Samuel opened the window, letting in a breeze that carried the scent of sage and distant water. "I like him, Amelia. He seems honest." "I think he is." She looked around their new home, already imagining how they could make it comfortable, make it theirs. "I really think he is." They rode back to the mining shack with Ethan driving the wagon, and if he was shocked by the conditions they had been living in, he was polite enough not to show it. He helped them load up their meager possessions without comment, and within an hour, they were back at the ranch unloading everything into the bunkhouse. Amelia spent the rest of the day making the space livable, sweeping out dust and unpacking their few belongings while Samuel helped Ethan with some minor repairs around the property. By the time evening fell, the bunkhouse actually felt like a home. It was small and simple, but it was clean and safe and theirs. Ethan knocked on the door just as Amelia was considering what to make for dinner with the vegetables he had given them. "I thought you might want to eat up at the main house tonight," he said when she opened the door. "I've got a roast cooking and there is more than enough for 3. Consider it a welcome dinner." Samuel appeared behind Amelia, drawn by the mention of roast, and she found herself laughing at his eager expression. "That sounds wonderful, thank you." The main house was just as neat and well kept as the garden, with simple furniture and clean floors that showed someone had taken care with the space. Ethan had set the table for 3, and the smell of cooking meat made Amelia's mouth water despite the vegetables they had been eating. He served them generous portions along with bread and butter, and for a while the only sound was the clink of silverware as they all ate with the appetite of people who worked hard in the Nevada heat. "Tell me about yourselves," Ethan said eventually, pouring them all coffee from a battered pot. "Where did you come from before Paradise?" Samuel launched into the story of their wanderings, telling about the various mining camps and small towns they had lived in as their father chased silver strikes across the territory. He made it sound like an adventure, glossing over the hardships and focusing on the interesting characters they had met and the strange places they had seen. Amelia let him talk, adding details here and there, watching the way Ethan listened with genuine interest. "Sounds like you have seen a lot of the territory," Ethan said when Samuel finally wound down. "That is more than most people can say. I have been on this ranch for almost 10 years, ever since my father died and left it to me. I have barely been outside Paradise except for cattle drives." "You have built something good here," Amelia said, looking around at the comfortable house. "It must have been hard doing it on your own. It has had its moments." Ethan's expression turned distant. "My sister moved to San Francisco 5 years ago when she married, so it has just been me since then. Some days the quiet is nice. Other days it is too much." There was a loneliness in his words that Amelia recognized, the specific isolation that came from being surrounded by space, but having no one to share it with. She wondered how many evenings he had eaten dinner alone at this table, how many sunsets he had watched from the porch without anyone to talk to about what he had seen. "Well, you have got company now," Samuel said cheerfully, apparently oblivious to the undertones of the conversation. "Amelia is a good cook, too. Way better than me. I can barely make beans without burning them. I am looking forward to finding out." Ethan's eyes met Amelia's across the table, and there was something warm in his gaze that made her feel seen in a way she had not experienced in a very long time. "I think this is going to work out well for all of us." After dinner, Samuel excused himself to go back to the bunkhouse, claiming exhaustion but giving Amelia a knowing look that made her want to kick him under the table. Ethan offered to show her around the kitchen and explain where everything was kept so she could start cooking meals the next day, and they ended up standing side by side at the sink, washing dishes in comfortable silence. "I want you to know that you are safe here," Ethan said suddenly, his hands stilling in the soapy water. "I realize this whole situation might seem strange, a man you barely know offering you work and a place to live. But I meant what I said about this being honest employment. I am not expecting anything from you except good work and maybe some conversation over dinner now and then." Amelia had been wondering when this conversation would come up, and she was grateful he had addressed it directly. "I believe you," she said quietly. "You have been nothing but kind to us, and I appreciate it more than I can say. But I would be lying if I said I was not a little nervous. We do not know each other well, and this territory is not always kind to women in vulnerable positions. I understand." He turned to face her, drying his hands on a towel. "How about this? We will take it day by day. If at any point you feel uncomfortable or want to leave, you can do so with no questions asked, and I will pay you for the time you worked. And if there is ever anything that makes you uneasy, you tell me immediately. Deal." She extended her hand and he shook it firmly. Deal. The contact lingered just a moment longer than a simple handshake required, his calloused palm warm against hers, and when their eyes met, Amelia felt that flutter in her chest again. She pulled her hand back, reminding herself that this was her employer, that she needed this job too much to complicate it with attraction, no matter how compelling Ethan Mallory might be. That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in weeks, Amelia listened to Samuel's soft snoring from the other room and tried to process how dramatically their circumstances had changed in just 2 days. They had gone from starving and desperate to employed and housed, all because she had been caught stealing vegetables by a cowboy who responded with generosity instead of anger. She thought about Ethan's smile and his careful hands in the garden, and the way he had spoken to Samuel with respect instead of condescension. She thought about the loneliness she had heard in his voice when he talked about his sister leaving, the quiet of his house when there was no one to share it with. And she thought about the fact that despite her best intentions to keep things purely professional, she was already starting to care about him in ways that went beyond gratitude. It was foolish, she told herself. She barely knew him. They were employer and employee, nothing more. The fact that her heart sped up when he looked at her, that she found herself watching the way he moved through the world with such quiet competence, was irrelevant. She needed to focus on building a stable life for herself and Samuel, not on indulging romantic fantasies about a cowboy who was almost certainly just being kind without any deeper motive. But as she drifted off to sleep in her comfortable bed with a full stomach and a roof that did not leak, she allowed herself the small luxury of imagining what it might be like if Ethan's kindness meant something more. Just for a moment, before sleep claimed her, she let herself wonder if maybe, just maybe, the flutter in her chest was mutual. The next morning, Amelia woke with the sun and immediately set about proving her worth. She made breakfast for the 3 of them using eggs from the chickens and bread she baked in Ethan's oven. And the look on his face when he tasted her cooking made all the effort worthwhile. After breakfast, she worked in the garden while Samuel went with Ethan to learn about mending fences, and she found a deep satisfaction in tending the plants that had inadvertently brought her to this place. The days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Amelia managed the household and the garden, cooking 3 meals a day and keeping the house clean while also learning the dozens of small tasks required to keep a ranch running. Samuel threw himself into the ranch work with enthusiasm, learning from Ethan how to handle cattle and horses and repair equipment. In the evenings, they would all gather for dinner, sharing stories about their day and slowly building the kind of easy familiarity that came from shared work and mutual respect. 3 weeks into their employment, Amelia found herself in town buying supplies. Paradise was a typical Nevada frontier town, a collection of wooden buildings clustered around a main street with more saloons than churches and more gambling halls than schools. She kept her head down as she walked, not wanting to attract attention, but she could feel eyes following her. Young women were scarce in Paradise, and the Barrett girl working for Ethan Mallory was apparently interesting enough to warrant gossip. She was loading her purchases into the wagon when a shadow fell across her. She looked up to find Pete Donovan standing there, the man who had killed her father. He was a large man with a mean face and eyes that held no warmth, and the sight of him made her stomach clench with a mixture of fear and rage. "Heard you were working for Mallory now," Donovan said, his voice carrying the lazy menace of someone who knew he held power. "That is interesting." Your father would probably not approve of his daughter living on a ranch with a single man. Amelia forced herself to meet his eyes, refusing to show the fear coursing through her. My father is dead, Mr. Donovan. You saw to that. What I do now is none of your concern. Everything in paradise is my concern. He leaned against the wagon, too close for comfort. I am just looking out for your reputation. People might get the wrong idea about what kind of work you are doing out there at the Mallory Ranch. Then people have dirty minds and nothing better to do than spread gossip. She finished loading the supplies, her hands shaking with suppressed anger. Now, if you will excuse me, I need to get back. Donovan's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, his grip tight enough to hurt. I am not done talking to you, girl. Your father owed me money before he died, and I am thinking that debt passes to his children. Let go of me. Amelia tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. Fear spiked through her anger, and she glanced around hoping someone would intervene, but the few people on the street were carefully looking away. No one wanted to cross Pete Donovan. I said let go. A new voice cut through the tension, and Amelia looked up to see Ethan striding toward them, his face set in an expression she had never seen before. There was nothing gentle about him now. He looked dangerous in a way that made even Donovan release her wrist and step back. This is none of your business, Mallory, Donovan said, but there was a note of uncertainty in his voice. Amelia works for me, which makes it my business. Ethan positioned himself between them, his stance protective. And I do not take kindly to people manhandling my employees. So why do not you move along before this becomes a problem? For a moment, the two men stared at each other, and Amelia could feel the violence humming in the air between them. Then Donovan sneered and stepped back, his hands raised in mock surrender. No problem here, Mallory. I was just having a conversation with Miss Barrett about her father's debts, but we can continue that conversation another time. He walked away, and Amelia released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Ethan turned to her immediately, his anger shifting to concern as he gently took her wrist and examined where Donovan had grabbed her. His touch was infinitely careful, the complete opposite of Donovan's brutality. Are you all right? His voice was tight with suppressed emotion. Did he hurt you? I am fine, just shaken. She pulled her wrist back, though part of her wanted to keep his hand holding hers. He said my father owed him money. Your father did not owe him anything. Donovan is looking for an excuse to cause trouble. Ethan's jaw clenched. He has been trying to buy up property around Paradise for years, and he does not like it when people refuse to sell. Your father's claim was sitting on land Donovan wanted, which is why he killed him and made it look like self-defense. Everyone knows that, but no one will say it. Bitterness crept into Amelia's voice. He walks around town free while my father is in the ground. I know. It is not right. Ethan helped her up into the wagon seat, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. But from now on, you do not come to town alone. Either Samuel or I will come with you. I do not trust Donovan, and I do not want him getting anywhere near you again. The protective edge in his voice made something warm unfurl in Amelia's chest, but she fought it down. I can take care of myself. I have been doing it for a long time. I know you can, but you do not have to anymore. He glanced at her as he guided the horses out of town. That is what having people around means. You can share the burden instead of carrying it all yourself. They rode in silence for a while, and Amelia found herself studying Ethan's profile against the bright Nevada sky. The hard angles of his face had softened now that the confrontation was over, but she could still see the tension in his shoulders. He had been genuinely angry on her behalf, genuinely worried about her safety, and that meant something. Thank you for stepping in back there, she said quietly. I was not sure what to do. You do not have to thank me. I would do the same for anyone." He paused, then added, "But especially for you." The last words were spoken so softly she almost missed them, and her heart did that traitorous flutter again. She told herself not to read too much into it, but the warmth in his voice was undeniable. They were not just employer and employee anymore, if they ever really had been. They were becoming friends, or maybe something more, and the realization was both thrilling and terrifying. Back at the ranch, Samuel met them at the wagon, his face clouding when Amelia told him about the encounter with Donovan. "That man needs to pay for what he did to Father," he said, his young voice hard with anger. "Maybe someday he will," Ethan said, unloading supplies. "But not today and not by us. Donovan has too much influence in Paradise, and going after him directly would just get you killed. Sometimes you have to be patient and wait for justice to find its own way. That is not fair." Samuel kicked at the dirt, his frustration palpable. "No, it is not. But fair and real are not the same thing." Ethan's voice was gentle but firm. "Your father would want you to survive and build a good life, not throw it away on revenge. The best thing you can do is prove that his death did not break you, that you are stronger than what happened." Amelia met Ethan's eyes over Samuel's head, and the understanding she saw there took her breath away. He was not just saying empty words to comfort her brother. He believed what he was saying, and more than that, he was offering them a path forward that did not involve more violence and loss. It was the kind of wisdom that came from his own experience with grief, and she found herself respecting him even more for it. That night, after Samuel had gone to bed, Amelia found herself unable to sleep. The encounter with Donovan had shaken her more than she wanted to admit, bringing back all the fear and uncertainty she had been trying to bury. She slipped out of the bunkhouse and walked toward the garden, needing the quiet and the cool night air to settle her thoughts. She found Ethan already there, sitting on the ground with his back against the fence looking up at the stars. He glanced over as she approached, and a slow smile crossed his face. "Could not sleep either. Too much on my mind." She settled down beside him, maintaining a respectful distance but close enough to feel his presence. "Thank you again for what you did today. With Donovan, you already thanked me." He pulled a piece of grass and twisted it between his fingers. "But you are welcome. I meant what I said about not letting him near you again." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the night sounds of the desert filling the space between them. Then Amelia found herself asking the question that had been nagging at her since they met. "Why did you really help us, Ethan? And do not say it is just because you needed ranch hands. You could have hired anyone." He was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "About a year ago, I was in town and I saw a woman begging on the street with her child. She was clearly desperate, and people were just walking past her like she did not exist. I gave her some money and food, but it did not feel like enough. That night I could not stop thinking about her, about how easily any of us could end up in that position if luck went wrong. How my sister could have been that woman if things had gone differently after our parents died." He paused, and Amelia waited, sensing he needed to work through the thought. "When I found you in my garden that night, I saw that same desperation. And I thought about all the times someone could have helped me and my sister when we were young and struggling, and sometimes they did, and sometimes they did not. The times they did made all the difference. So I guess I helped you because I know what it is like to need help and how much it means when someone gives it." Amelia felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. "That is a good reason. It is a selfish reason, really. Helping you made me feel better about all the times I could not help someone else." He looked at her then, and in the starlight, his eyes were dark and serious. "But that is not why I asked you to stay. I asked you to stay because from the moment we met, I felt like I had found something I did not know I was missing, and I am not sure what to do with that." Amelia's breath caught. The careful walls she had been building around her feelings crumbled in the face of his honesty. "I feel it too," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I am afraid of it. You are my employer, and Samuel and I depend on this job. If things went wrong between us, we would have nowhere to go. So we will not let things go wrong." He reached over and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers with a gentleness that made her heart ache. "I am not suggesting we rush into anything, but I am also not going to pretend that I do not care about you, because I think you already know that I do. So maybe we just take it slow and see where it goes." It was logical and reasonable and absolutely terrifying. Amelia had spent so long just trying to survive that the idea of letting herself want something more, want someone more, felt like stepping off a cliff. But when she looked at Ethan, at the hope and vulnerability in his expression, she realized that maybe the cliff was worth the jump. "Slow sounds good," she said, and squeezed his hand. "I can do slow." His smile was brilliant even in the darkness, and he lifted their joined hands to press a kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned and sweet, and it made her feel cherished in a way she had not experienced before. They sat there in the garden for another hour, talking about everything and nothing, hands linked and shoulders eventually touching as the night deepened around them. When Amelia finally returned to the bunkhouse, her heart was light despite the day's earlier troubles. She had found safety and employment here at the ranch, but maybe she had also found something more. Something that looked like a future she had been afraid to dream about. The next few weeks were some of the happiest Amelia had ever experienced. She and Ethan navigated their growing relationship with care, stealing moments together in the garden after Samuel went to bed, sharing smiles across the dinner table, brushing hands when they worked side by side. It was slow and sweet and felt more real than anything she had known. Samuel seemed to sense the shift between them, but had the good grace not to comment, though Amelia caught him grinning knowingly more than once. The boy was thriving at the ranch, growing stronger from the hard work and regular meals, losing the haunted look that had plagued him since their father's death. Watching him laugh with Ethan as they worked with the horses, seeing him become the carefree teenager he should have been all along, filled Amelia with a gratitude so intense it sometimes brought tears to her eyes. One evening in late August, after a particularly hot day, Ethan suggested they ride out to a spot he knew where a natural spring created a small pool. "It is not much," he said, "but the water stays cool even in summer, and the sunset from there is something special." They rode out together, Samuel choosing to stay behind and work on a wood carving project he had started, and Amelia found herself both nervous and excited to have time alone with Ethan away from the ranch. The spring was everything he had promised, a small oasis of green in the brown desert landscape, with water so clear she could see the rocky bottom. Ethan spread out a blanket he had brought, and they sat watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The beauty of it was almost painful, the vast Nevada landscape stretching out in all directions with nothing but space and possibility. "I come here when I need to think," Ethan said, breaking the comfortable silence. "It helps me remember that there is more to life than just work and worry." "It is beautiful." Amelia pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "I can see why you like it. I wanted to show it to you because I have been doing a lot of thinking lately." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "About us, about what we are doing." Amelia's heart clenched, fearing he was about to say this had been a mistake, that they should keep things professional. But instead, he reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch sending shivers down her spine. "I know we said we would take things slow," he continued, "and I still think that is smart. But I also need you to know that this is not casual for me. What I feel for you is not something I have felt before, and it is growing stronger every day. You are not just my employee or even just my friend. You are becoming essential to me in a way that is both wonderful and terrifying." Amelia's breath caught at the raw honesty in his words. She had been trying so hard to protect her heart, to be practical and sensible, but hearing him lay his feelings bare made her own defenses crumble. "I feel the same way," she admitted. "Every day I wake up and I am amazed that this is my life now, that I get to see you and talk to you and work beside you. You have given Samuel and me so much more than just a job. You have given us hope. You have given me something too." His hand moved from her hair to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her skin with devastating tenderness. "This ranch stopped feeling empty the day you arrived. The house feels like a home again, and I wake up every morning eager to start the day because I know I will see you." The sun was setting behind him, lighting his hair with gold, and Amelia thought she had never seen anything as beautiful as Ethan Mallory looking at her like she was precious. When he leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, she closed the distance between them instead, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that felt like coming home. It was gentle and sweet, a promise more than a demand, and when they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. Ethan rested his forehead against hers, his hand still cradling her face like she was something delicate. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted with a soft laugh. "So have I." Amelia felt giddy, light with happiness in a way she had not experienced since childhood. Was it worth the wait? Absolutely. He kissed her again, longer this time, deeper, and she felt herself melting into him. His other arm came around her waist, pulling her closer, and she wrapped her arms around his neck, losing herself in the feeling of being held and wanted and cherished. They stayed at the spring until the stars came out, talking and kissing and making plans for a future that was no longer frightening but full of possibility. Ethan told her about his dreams for the ranch, about wanting to expand the cattle operation and maybe build a bigger house someday. Amelia told him about wanting to learn to read better, about hoping Samuel could get some real education, about the small dreams she had never dared speak aloud before because they seemed too impossible. "Nothing is impossible," Ethan said firmly. "We will make all of it happen, together." The word "together" filled Amelia with a warmth that had nothing to do with the lingering heat of the day. She had been alone for so long, carrying every burden by herself, that the idea of sharing the weight with someone else felt revolutionary. But here was Ethan, offering exactly that, and she found herself believing him. They rode back to the ranch in the moonlight, holding hands when the terrain allowed, and when they reached the barn, Ethan pulled her close for one more kiss before they separated for the night. "Sleep well," he murmured against her lips. "Dream about me." "Always," she promised, and from the glow in his eyes she could tell he understood she was not just talking about tonight. The next morning, Amelia woke feeling like the world had shifted on its axis. She and Ethan were together now, truly together, and the knowledge made everything brighter. She hummed as she made breakfast, caught Samuel staring at her with amusement when she smiled at nothing, and felt her heart skip when Ethan arrived for the morning meal with flowers from the garden tucked into his shirt pocket. "For you," he said simply, handing them over with a look that made her blush. Samuel rolled his eyes but was grinning, clearly pleased to see his sister happy. The days took on a new quality. Work was still work, but now it was punctuated by stolen kisses in the barn, by Ethan's hand finding hers under the dinner table, by late-night conversations in the garden where they shared their pasts, and plan their futures. Samuel adapted to the change with easy acceptance, telling Amelia he thought Ethan was good for her, and that he did not mind if they got married someday, which made her blush and laugh and swat at him affectionately. But not everyone in Paradise was pleased with the situation. Word spread quickly in small towns, and soon everyone knew that Amelia Barrett was not just working for Ethan Mallory, but was involved with him romantically. Most people did not care beyond mild curiosity, but Pete Donovan saw it as an opportunity. He started spreading rumors that Amelia was taking advantage of Ethan, that she had seduced him to secure her position at the ranch. The gossip was ugly and persistent, and though Ethan dismissed it as jealous nonsense, Amelia could see how it bothered him when people he had known for years looked at him with speculation or pity. Things came to a head one day when Ethan was in town conducting business, and Donovan cornered him outside the bank. Amelia was not there, but Samuel was, and he came running back to the ranch with his face pale and his words tumbling over each other. "Donovan challenged Ethan," Samuel gasped, out of breath from running. "He said things about you, awful things, and Ethan told him to stop. Then Donovan said if Ethan was man enough, he would meet him for a fight tomorrow at noon in front of the saloon." Amelia's blood ran cold. "Where is Ethan now?" "Still in town. He told me to come get you." She did not hesitate. She climbed into the wagon and drove to Paradise faster than was probably safe, her mind racing. Ethan was a capable man, but Donovan was known for his brutality. He had killed her father without facing consequences, and she had no doubt he would do the same to Ethan if given the chance. She found him at the general store, loading supplies, and from the tension in his shoulders, she could tell Samuel's report was accurate. "Do not do this," she said without preamble. "Do not fight him." Ethan turned, and the expression on his face was a mixture of anger and resignation. "He called you terrible names in front of half the town, Amelia. I cannot let that stand. So he says vicious things and you risk getting yourself killed. That does not make sense." She grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. "Donovan wants you to fight him. It is a trap. He will kill you the same way he killed my father and claim it was a fair fight." "I know." Ethan's voice was tight. "But what choice do I have? If I back down, everyone will think the things he said are true. They will think I am a coward." "I do not care what they think. I care about you staying alive." Amelia could feel tears threatening, but she forced them back. "Please, Ethan. There has to be another way." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her right there on the main street of Paradise with people watching. "I do not want to fight him either," he admitted quietly. "But I will not let him talk about you that way. I will not let him win." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other while Amelia's mind raced for a solution. Then an idea came to her, born of desperation but possibly workable. "What if we left?" she said. "What if we just packed up and went somewhere else? California or Oregon or anywhere that Donovan cannot reach us." Ethan pulled back to look at her, his expression torn. "This ranch is my home. It is everything I have built, everything my parents left me. I cannot just walk away from it, even if staying means dying." She could hear the desperation in her own voice. "Because that is what will happen if you meet Donovan tomorrow. He will kill you, Ethan, and there will be nothing I can do to stop it." He cupped her face in his hands, his eyes full of conflicting emotions. "Let me think about it. We have until tomorrow. Maybe there is a third option we have not considered yet." They drove back to the ranch in heavy silence, and that evening the three of them sat around the dinner table trying to find a solution that would not end in bloodshed. Samuel suggested going to the territorial marshal, but the nearest marshal was 3 days away in Carson City, and there was no time. Amelia suggested they fortify the ranch and refuse to leave, but Ethan pointed out that Donovan could just burn them out or rustle his cattle until he was financially ruined. It was Samuel who finally said what they were all thinking. Maybe you have to fight him, but maybe you do not have to fight fair. Both Amelia and Ethan looked at him, and the boy flushed but pressed on. Donovan does not fight fair. He killed our father through deception, and he has been terrorizing Paradise for years because everyone is too afraid to stand up to him. Maybe it is time someone showed him what it feels like to be on the receiving end. What are you suggesting? Ethan asked carefully. I am suggesting that tomorrow you show up for that fight, but we make sure you have backup. We make sure that if Donovan tries anything underhanded, he is the one who gets caught. Samuel's young face was set in determined lines. We make sure everyone in Paradise sees him for what he really is. It was not a perfect plan, but as they talked through the details late into the night, it started to take shape. They would need help, people in Paradise who were tired of Donovan's bullying and willing to stand up to him. Ethan knew a few ranchers and businessmen who had been hurt by Donovan's schemes, and he thought he could convince them to be present at the fight as witnesses. Samuel would position himself where he could see if Donovan had hidden weapons or accomplices. And Amelia, despite Ethan's protests, would be there too, because she refused to let him face danger alone. This could go very wrong, Ethan said as they finalized the plan. If Donovan realizes what we are doing, he might just start shooting. Then we make sure he does not realize, Amelia said firmly. You taught me that sometimes you have to be patient and wait for justice to find its way. Well, maybe we can help justice along a little. The next morning dawned hot and clear, and Amelia's nerves were so taut she thought she might snap. She made breakfast mechanically, her mind on the confrontation to come. Ethan was quiet, his face set in grim determination as he cleaned his rifle and checked his revolver. Samuel was pale but resolute, and Amelia felt a surge of pride for her brother's courage even as she wished he did not have to be brave at all. They rode into Paradise just before noon, and the main street was already crowded. Word of the fight had spread, and it seemed like everyone in the territory had come to watch. Amelia spotted the ranchers Ethan had contacted, men who nodded subtly to show they were ready to intervene if necessary. Samuel slipped away to take up his watching position, and Amelia positioned herself near the general store where she would have a clear view but be out of the immediate line of fire. Donovan emerged from the saloon at exactly noon, and the crowd quieted. He was bigger than Ethan, heavier with muscle, and he moved with the confidence of a man who had never lost a fight. Two of his men flanked him, and Amelia's stomach clenched when she saw they were armed. "Glad you showed up, Mallory," Donovan called out. "Thought you might run off with your little whore." The slur made Amelia's blood boil, but Ethan's expression did not change. "I am here," he said evenly. "Though I am wondering why we need your friends, I thought this was between you and me, just making sure nobody interferes." Donovan cracked his knuckles, a show of intimidation that might have worked if Amelia had not seen the glint of metal on his belt partially hidden by his coat. A knife or a small pistol, exactly the kind of hidden weapon they had anticipated. Samuel must have seen it too because he called out from his position, "Mr. Donovan, is that a weapon under your coat?" "I thought this was supposed to be a fair fight," the crowd murmured, and Donovan's face flushed with anger. "Shut up, boy. This does not concern you." "It concerns all of us." One of the ranchers stepped forward, a grizzled man named Tom Reynolds who had lost property to Donovan's schemes. "If you are going to fight, fight fair. Show us what you got hidden there." Donovan's hand moved toward the concealed weapon, but now everyone was watching, and he knew he could not draw it without confirming the accusation. "It is nothing," he blustered. "Just a tool." "Then you will not mind showing us," Ethan said calmly, and Amelia could see the trap closing. "Or we can call this whole thing off and everyone can go home." For a moment, Donovan looked like he might explode with rage. Then he made a choice that Amelia had not anticipated. He pulled the small pistol from his belt and aimed it directly at Ethan. "I am tired of playing games, Mallory. You want to defend your woman's honor. Let us see you do it with a bullet in your chest." Everything happened at once. The crowd scattered, several people screaming. Ethan dove to the side as Donovan fired, the bullet kicking up dust where he had been standing. And then, before Donovan could fire again, Tom Reynolds and two other ranchers tackled him to the ground, wrestling the pistol away. Sheriff Morgan, who had been watching from the edges, finally moved forward to restore order. He was an older man who had turned a blind eye to Donovan's activities for years, but even he could not ignore attempted murder in front of dozens of witnesses. "Pete Donovan, you are under arrest," he said, sounding almost relieved, "for attempted murder and disturbing the peace." Donovan fought against the men holding him, his face purple with rage. "This is not over, Mallory. You hear me? This is not over." But it was. With so many witnesses and the pistol as evidence, even Donovan's influence could not save him. He was dragged off to jail, still shouting threats, and the crowd slowly dispersed, buzzing with excitement over the drama they had witnessed. Amelia ran to Ethan, throwing her arms around him and holding tight. He was shaking slightly, adrenaline clearly still coursing through him, but he was alive and unhurt. "That was too close," she whispered into his chest. "When he pulled that gun, I thought the same thing." He pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face. "But we did it. We stood up to him and we won." Samuel joined them, looking younger than his 14 years as he hugged them both. "Is it really over? Will he go to jail?" "With this many witnesses, he will have to stand trial," Tom Reynolds said, approaching with the other ranchers. "And I think most of Paradise is tired enough of his bullying that he will actually see consequences this time. We will make sure of it." The territorial marshal arrived 3 days later and took Donovan away to face trial in Carson City. The evidence was overwhelming, and combined with new testimonies from people who were finally willing to speak up about Donovan's other crimes, including the murder of Amelia's father, it seemed certain he would spend years in prison. The day after Donovan left Paradise, Ethan came to find Amelia in the garden where she was harvesting tomatoes. "I have been thinking," he said, kneeling down beside her in the dirt, "about what you said before the fight, about leaving and starting over somewhere else." Amelia's heart clenched. "Ethan, you do not have to leave. Paradise is your home. Let me finish." He took her hands, dirt and all, and held them firmly. "I realized something when I thought I might die. This ranch means a lot to me, but it is not what makes my life worth living. You are. You and Samuel and the family we are building together. That is home." She felt tears prick her eyes. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that wherever you are is where I want to be. If that is here on this ranch in Paradise, wonderful. If it is somewhere else, that is fine too. As long as we are together." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "Amelia Barrett, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me, whatever that life looks like?" The tears spilled over, and Amelia found herself laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he pulled her into a kiss that was witnessed by the tomato plants and the big Nevada sky and nothing else, and it was perfect. They were married a month later in a simple ceremony attended by the few friends Ethan had in paradise, and presided over by a traveling preacher who happened to be passing through. Amelia wore a dress she had sewn herself from fabric Ethan had bought in town, simple but pretty, and Samuel stood beside Ethan as best man with a grin that suggested he thought this was the best outcome possible. Tom Reynolds gave Amelia away, a gesture that moved her more than she could express, and when she and Ethan said their vows under the open sky with the ranch spread out around them, she felt like she had finally found the place she belonged. The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. Running a ranch was hard work, and there were times when money was tight or the weather was bad or they both wondered if they had bitten off more than they could chew. But they faced every challenge together, and that made all the difference. Samuel continued to thrive, growing taller and stronger and more confident. Ethan taught him everything about ranching, and the boy proved to have a natural talent with horses. By his 16th birthday, he was handling the breaking and training of new horses himself, and they had started earning extra income from selling well-trained mounts to other ranchers. Amelia expanded the garden, turning it into a true vegetable farm that produced more than they could eat. She started selling the surplus in paradise, and before long, she had a steady stream of customers who appreciated fresh produce in the harsh desert environment. The extra income helped cushion them against bad cattle years, and Amelia felt a deep satisfaction in contributing to their financial stability. 2 years after their wedding, Amelia discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure, and Ethan became almost comically protective, insisting she rest more and work less despite her protests that she was pregnant, not incapacitated. Their son was born on a warm spring morning in 1885, delivered with the help of a midwife from paradise. They named him Thomas, after Tom Reynolds, who had helped save Ethan's life and had become a good friend to them both. The baby had Ethan's dark hair and Amelia's eyes, and holding him for the first time, Amelia felt a completeness she had not known she was missing. Ethan was a devoted father from the first moment, taking to the role with the same quiet competence he brought to everything else. He would walk the floor with Thomas in the middle of the night, singing off key lullabies that made Amelia smile even through her exhaustion. Samuel was equally smitten with his nephew, and the teenager proved surprisingly good with babies, often volunteering to watch Thomas so Amelia and Ethan could have time alone together. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Ethan's careful management and Amelia's contributions from the garden meant they had enough money to make improvements. They expanded the barn, built a proper chicken coop that finally kept out predators, and even added a room onto the house for Thomas and any future children they might have. Paradise itself was changing too. The arrival of the railroad in 1886 brought new opportunities and new people. The town grew more civilized, with a proper school and a church and businesses that catered to families rather than just single men. Pete Donovan was a distant memory, serving out his sentence in Carson City, and the town felt safer without his malevolent presence. When Thomas was 3, Amelia became pregnant again, and this time she was less frightened and more excited. She knew what to expect, and she had Ethan beside her every step of the way. Their daughter was born in the fall of 1888, a tiny thing with a surprising amount of red hair that came from neither parent, but might have come from Amelia's grandmother, according to family stories. They named her Rose, after the wild roses that grew near the spring where Ethan had first kissed Amelia. The little girl was a force of nature from the beginning, loud and demanding, and absolutely adored by her entire family. Thomas took his role as big brother seriously, always watching out for his sister even when she was still an infant. Samuel married in 1889, wedding a young woman named Sarah who had moved to Paradise with her family. The wedding was a joyful affair, and Ethan gifted Samuel a portion of the ranch land to build his own house on. The two men continued to work the ranch together, but Samuel had his own space and his own growing family, which felt right and natural. Over the years, Amelia never forgot the desperate girl she had been, stealing vegetables in the night because she had no other choice. Sometimes, she would stand in the garden that had changed her life and marvel at how different everything had become. She had a home, a family, a purpose, and most importantly, she had Ethan. Their love had not dimmed with time. If anything, it had grown deeper and more solid, built on years of shared work and shared dreams and the thousand small kindnesses that made up a life together. They still took evening walks to the spring when they could steal time away from the children. They still talked late into the night about their hopes and plans. And they still looked at each other with the same mixture of fondness and desire that had characterized those early days when they were just beginning to fall in love. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1892, Ethan took Amelia back to the garden where they had first met. The children were with Samuel and Sarah for the evening, giving them rare time alone. He had set up a blanket and a picnic basket, and they ate dinner under the stars just as they had done so many times before. "You remember the first time you came here?" Ethan asked, pouring her a glass of wine from a bottle he had been saving. "You were so scared, trying to steal tomatoes in the dark." Amelia laughed at the memory. "I remember thinking you were going to shoot me or have me arrested. Instead, you filled my basket and told me to come back tomorrow." "Best decision I ever made." He raised his glass in a toast. "To coming back tomorrow, may we always have tomorrow together." She touched her glass to his, the crystal ringing softly in the quiet evening. "To tomorrow," she echoed, "and to all the tomorrows we have already shared." They drank, and Ethan set down his glass to pull her close. "I love you, Amelia Mallory. I loved you from the moment I saw you in my garden, and I will love you until the day I die. I love you too." She kissed him softly, tasting wine and the lingering sweetness of dessert. "You saved my life that night. You and Samuel both. You saved mine right back." His arms tightened around her. "Before you came, I was just going through the motions, working, surviving, but not really living. You reminded me what it meant to have something worth fighting for. Someone worth building a life with." They made love under the stars that night, tender and passionate and full of the deep knowledge that came from years of intimacy. And later, wrapped in the blanket with Ethan's arm around her, Amelia looked up at the vast Nevada sky and thought about all the impossible roads that had led her to this moment. Her father's death had been a tragedy, but it had also been the beginning of her real life. Being forced to steal from a garden had led her to the man she loved. Desperation had become opportunity, fear had transformed into hope, and all because a cowboy had responded to her need with kindness instead of anger. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked softly, his hand tracing patterns on her arm. "About how grateful I am." She turned to face him, memorizing his features in the starlight. "For that night when you found me in your garden, for every choice you have made since then, for this life we have built." "The best gardens grow from small seeds planted with care," Ethan said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "We just happened to plant something special." Years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growing children. Thomas proved to have his father's skill with cattle and his mother's way with growing things. Rose was wild and beautiful, with a fearless spirit that both delighted and terrified her parents. Samuel's family expanded as well. and soon the ranch was alive with the sound of children playing, cousins growing up together in the same way Ethan and his sister had once done. The garden that had brought Amelia and Ethan together remained a central part of the ranch. Amelia tended it with love, expanding it year by year, teaching her children the same lessons Ethan had taught her about patience and care and respecting the land. Thomas and Rose both learned to garden alongside her, and she treasured those quiet moments working in the soil with her children, passing down knowledge the way Ethan's mother had passed it to him. Paradise continued to grow and civilize. The wild frontier town of 1882 became a proper small city with paved streets and electric lights, and a railroad station that connected them to the wider world. But the ranch remained a constant, a piece of the old Nevada that had not been completely tamed by progress. In 1900, when Amelia was 37 and Ethan 43, they celebrated their 18th wedding anniversary with a large party that brought together everyone they cared about. Samuel and Sarah were there with their 4 children. Tom Reynolds came with his wife, now elderly but still sharp. Friends from Paradise and neighboring ranches gathered to celebrate the couple who had become pillars of the community. As Amelia looked around at the crowd filling their home and spilling out into the yard, she marveled at how full her life had become. She thought about the scared girl she had been at 19, stealing vegetables and trying to keep her brother alive one more day. If she could have told that girl about this future, about the love and family and home waiting for her, she never would have believed it. Thomas, now 15 and looking more like his father every day, raised his glass in a toast. "To my parents," he said, his young voice steady and clear, "who taught me that kindness matters more than pride, that hard work builds good things, and that real love is something you choose every day, not just once." "Hear, hear." The gathered guests raised their glasses, and Amelia felt tears prick her eyes at her son's words. Beside her, Ethan squeezed her hand, his own eyes suspiciously bright. Later, after the guests had gone home and the children were asleep, Amelia and Ethan walked out to the garden one more time. It had become their habit over the years, this quiet time together among the plants that had started everything. The moon was full, lighting the rows of vegetables and herbs with silver light, and Amelia could almost see the ghost of her younger self crouched by the fence, desperate and afraid. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had not come here that night?" she asked, leaning into Ethan's solid warmth. "If I had chosen a different garden or if you had not caught me?" "All the time," he admitted. "And then I thank God you did come here and I did catch you, because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. Even with all the challenges, the hard years and the struggles, especially with those." He turned her to face him, his hands resting on her waist. "The struggles made us stronger. They proved that what we have is real and lasting. Anyone can love someone when things are easy. It takes something special to love someone through the hard times, and we have done that. We have chosen each other every single day for 18 years. Amelia stood on her toes to kiss him, this man who had saved her life with simple kindness, and then spent nearly 2 decades proving that kindness was not a fluke, but a fundamental part of who he was. "Here is to choosing each other for another 18 years, she whispered against his lips. "And another 18 after that, for as long as we are blessed to have." "Deal," he murmured, and sealed it with a kiss that still had the power to make her heart race after all these years. As the years advanced further, their lives continued to intertwine with the land and the community they had helped build. Thomas took on more responsibility at the ranch, proving himself capable of running it with his father's guidance. Rose, spirited and independent, showed interest in the business side of ranching, learning to manage accounts and negotiate cattle prices with a skill that impressed even the toughest buyers. Samuel's oldest son, named Ethan after his uncle, began working the ranch alongside Thomas, and the two cousins became as close as brothers. The ranch was prospering beyond anything Ethan Sr. had dreamed possible in those early days, and he credited much of that success to Amelia's steady presence and wise counsel. But prosperity brought its own challenges. In 1905, a severe drought hit Nevada, and for the first time since the early days of their marriage, they faced the real possibility of losing everything. The cattle suffered, the grass turned brown and brittle, and even Amelia's beloved garden struggled despite careful watering from their well. During those hard months, Amelia saw Ethan age in ways that had nothing to do with passing years. The worry etched lines in his face and stole the ease from his movements. But they faced it together, just as they had faced every challenge. They sold off some of their herd to preserve water for the rest. They reached out to neighbors to share resources and information. And they held on, day by difficult day, trusting that the rains would come eventually. When the drought finally broke in late 1906, the relief was profound. The land greened almost overnight, the cattle recovered, and the ranch began to thrive again. But the experience had reminded them both of how fragile their prosperity was, how quickly things could change. "We should talk about the future," Ethan said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. He was 50 years old now, still strong but starting to slow down in ways he could not quite hide. "About what happens to the ranch when I am gone." "You are not going anywhere," Amelia said firmly, though her heart clenched at the thought. They were both getting older, though she tried not to think about it too much. "Eventually I will. We both will." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "And I want to make sure everything is set up right. Thomas can run the ranch. He is more than ready. But I want to make sure you are taken care of, and Samuel and his family, and Rose when she decides what she wants to do with her life." They spent many evenings that year planning and organizing, making sure their wishes were documented and clear. It was not morbid, Amelia decided, but rather an act of love. They were building a foundation that would support their children and grandchildren long after they were gone. Thomas married in 1908, bringing home a lovely woman named Elizabeth who fit into the family as if she had always been there. The wedding was a grand affair, celebrating not just the union of two people but the continuation of the family and the ranch they had all worked so hard to build. Ethan walked Elizabeth down the aisle alongside her father, a gesture that moved the bride to tears. And as Amelia watched her son pledge his love to his wife, she thought about her own wedding day so many years ago. She and Ethan had been so young, so uncertain about what the future held. But they had faced that future with courage and love, and they had built something beautiful. Rose announced in 1910 that she wanted to go to college in San Francisco, a decision that shocked some of the more traditional members of the community, but that Amelia and Ethan supported wholeheartedly. Their daughter had a sharp mind and ambitious dreams, and they wanted her to pursue them. "She is so much like you," Ethan told Amelia the night before Rose left for California, "independent and strong and unwilling to accept limitations." "She is like both of us," Amelia corrected. "She has your courage and determination, your refusal to give up when things get hard." They missed Rose terribly when she was gone, but her letters home were full of excitement and learning, and they took pride in her accomplishments. She studied business and economics, planning to return to Paradise and help expand their ranching operation into new markets. In 1912, on their 30th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered again for a celebration. Ethan was 55 now, Amelia 50, and they were surrounded by children and grandchildren and a community they had helped shape. Tom Reynolds had passed away the year before, but his son was there representing the family, continuing the friendship that had started so many years ago. 30 years, Samuel said in his toast, now a mature man of 41 with gray threading through his hair. 30 years of watching you two show the rest of us what a real marriage looks like, what real partnership means. You saved our lives, Ethan, mine and Amelia's, but more than that, you showed us how to live with dignity and love. We are all better people for knowing you both. The gathering cheered, and Amelia found herself crying openly, not from sadness but from overwhelming gratitude. She had been given so much more than she had ever thought to hope for. The desperate girl stealing vegetables had become a woman with a family, a home, a legacy. And it had all started because one kind cowboy had chosen compassion over anger. That night, alone in their bedroom in the house they had shared for 3 decades, Ethan pulled Amelia close and held her with a tenderness that took her breath away. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair, "for every day, for every moment, for building this life with me. Thank you for filling my basket and telling me to come back tomorrow," she whispered back. "For seeing me when I felt invisible, for loving me when I felt unlovable." They made love slowly, savoring each touch and kiss, celebrating not just their anniversary but the accumulation of all the days and nights they had shared. And afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, they talked until dawn about their children and grandchildren, about the ranch and its future, about all the tomorrows still waiting for them. The years that followed were gentler. Ethan and Amelia gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, letting Thomas and young Ethan handle the bulk of the work while they focused on the things they loved most. Amelia still tended her garden every day, now with the help of grandchildren who loved hearing her stories about the old days. Ethan still worked with the horses, teaching the youngest generation the same skills his mother had taught him. Rose returned from San Francisco in 1915 with a degree and ideas that helped modernize their operation. She never married, choosing instead to focus on business and family, and she became an invaluable part of the ranch's success. Her parents supported her choices without question, proud of the woman she had become. In the summer of 1922, Amelia was 60 years old and Ethan 65. They celebrated with a quiet dinner, just the two of them, at the spring where so many important moments of their life together had taken place. The children had offered to throw a party, but they had declined, wanting this time alone. 40 years, Ethan said, looking across the blanket at his wife. Her hair was silver now, her face lined with age, but to him, she was as beautiful as the night he had found her in his garden. 40 years since I found you stealing my tomatoes. Best tomatoes I ever stole, Amelia said with a laugh. Her hands were marked with age spots and the calluses of a lifetime of work, but they were still strong and capable. Changed my whole life. Changed mine too. He reached across to take her hand, their fingers interlocking with the ease of long practice. I love you, Amelia Mallory. I have loved you for 40 years, and I will love you for whatever time we have left. And I love you, she said simply. My cowboy who filled my basket and gave me a future. They sat together as the sun set over the Nevada desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and gold. Around them, the land stretched out vast and eternal, the same land where Amelia had once been desperate and afraid. But she was not afraid anymore. She had Ethan beside her, a family that loved her, a legacy that would outlast her lifetime. The garden that had brought them together still thrived, tended now by multiple generations. The ranch they had built together continued to prosper, providing for dozens of family members. And the love they had nurtured through 4 decades of marriage remained as strong and vital as it had been in those early days. As darkness fell and the stars emerged, Ethan pulled Amelia close, and they lay back on the blanket to watch the vast Nevada sky. She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling his heart beat steady and strong beneath her cheek, and thought about all the impossible miracles that had led to this moment. A girl stealing vegetables, a cowboy choosing kindness, a basket filled with more than just food, an invitation to come back tomorrow that had turned into a lifetime of tomorrows. "No regrets," Ethan murmured into the darkness. "None," Amelia agreed. "Not a single one." They stayed at the spring until late, talking and remembering, celebrating not just their years together but every moment that had brought them to this point. And when they finally made their way back to the ranch house, moving slowly but steadily in the moonlight, they walked hand in hand, just as they had done for 40 years. The house was dark when they arrived, the family all settled in their various homes around the property. Ethan and Amelia climbed into the bed they had shared for 4 decades, and he pulled her close with the same protective tenderness he had always shown her. "Tomorrow," he said softly, continuing a tradition that had started that first night in the garden. "Come back tomorrow." "Always," Amelia promised, just as she had promised every day for 40 years. "Always." And as they drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, the garden outside stood quiet in the moonlight, its rows of vegetables and herbs a living testament to the love that had grown from a single act of kindness. The tomatoes hung heavy on their vines, red and ripe and ready for harvest. The lettuce spread green and lush in neat rows. The carrots pushed up through the dark soil, growing strong and true. Tomorrow someone would harvest them, probably one of the grandchildren learning the same lessons Amelia had learned all those years ago. The garden would continue, just as the ranch would continue, just as the family would continue. Generation after generation, building on the foundation that a scared girl and a compassionate cowboy had laid down in 1882. But that was tomorrow's story. Tonight was just for Amelia and Ethan, for the quiet contentment of a love well lived and a life well shared. Tonight was for remembering the journey that had brought them together and celebrating the miracle of having found each other at all. In the morning, they would wake and begin again. They would tend the garden and watch the grandchildren and plan for the future that still stretched before them. They would choose each other again, as they had chosen each other every day for 4 decades. But for now, in the darkness of the Nevada night, they simply held each other close and let the years fall away. In this moment, they were not old ranchers at the end of their lives. They were still the desperate girl and the compassionate cowboy, still finding their way to each other across the impossible distance between loneliness and love. And in the garden outside, the vegetables continued to grow, nourished by good soil and careful tending, and the kind of patient love that understood some things were worth waiting for. Tomorrow they would be harvested and shared, feeding the family that had grown from a single basket filled by gentle hands. Tomorrow would come, as it always did, bringing new challenges and new joys. But Amelia and Ethan would face it together, just as they had faced every tomorrow for the past 40 years. Hand in hand, heart to heart, building a life from the simple truth that kindness was never wasted and love was always worth the risk. The story of the cowboy who found a girl stealing from his garden and filled her basket instead of turning her away would be told and retold by their descendants for generations. It would become family legend, the foundation story of the Mallory Ranch and the love that built it. But for Amelia and Ethan, it was not a story or a legend. It was simply their life, lived one day at a time, one tomorrow at a time, from that first moment in the garden to this quiet night 40 years later. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.